What kind of creatures didn't make it onto Noah's Ark? It's a question that sparks curiosity and imagination. We often picture pairs of every animal marching into the ark, but the reality was much more selective. From mythical beasts to the animals that lived in the sea, some creatures were left off the list. Even our beloved pets might not have been among those saved. Noah's mission was clear: to preserve the species that were crucial for the world's future, but who didn't make the cut. Now let's take a closer look at the fascinating creatures that were not part of Noah's famous voyage. Mythical beasts. Let's talk about those legendary creatures we've all heard about. Dragons, unicorns, and griffins. You might wonder, were they on Noah's Ark? The answer is no. These mythical beasts, while popular in folklore and legends, were not part of the natural world that Noah was instructed to save. The Ark wasn't a place for fantasy. It was meant to preserve real, living species that roamed the earth at that time. Think about it. Noah was tasked with saving the world's animals, the actual creatures that were part of everyday life. The absence of these mythical beings on the Ark serves as a reminder that the story focuses on preserving the reality of life as it was known, not the fantastical creatures of imagination. While dragons and unicorns might make for great stories, they didn't have a spot on Noah's boat. Instead, the Ark was filled with the animals that people could see, touch, and interact with, the ones that truly needed saving from the flood. Aquatic animals. Now, you might be wondering, what about all the fish, whales, and other sea creatures? Did Noah bring them on board the Ark too? The answer is no, they didn't need to be. Since the floodwaters covered the earth, these aquatic animals could continue living in their natural environment without any special help. The Ark was specifically for land-dwelling creatures, the ones that couldn't survive being submerged in water for such a long time. Think of it this way. Noah's mission was to protect the animals that were at risk of drowning or losing their habitat, like the birds and land animals. Fish and whales were perfectly fine swimming through the floodwaters, so there was no need to give them a spot on the Ark. It's a practical detail that makes a lot of sense when you consider the logistics of saving so many species. The Ark was a lifeboat for those creatures that needed it most, while the aquatic animals were safe right where they were. Insects and small invertebrates. When we think about Noah's Ark, we often picture big animals like lions, elephants, and giraffes. But what about the tiny creatures like insects, worms, and beetles? Were they on the Ark too? Some people think they might have been included, but many believe that these small invertebrates didn't need a special invitation to board. Why? Well, these tiny creatures are incredibly resilient. Insects and worms can survive in some pretty extreme conditions, and they're everywhere, hiding in the soil, under rocks, and even in the cracks of the Ark itself. Because they can thrive in almost any environment, it's likely they didn't need Noah's help to survive the flood. Instead, Noah's focus was on the larger, more vulnerable animals that couldn't fend for themselves in a world covered in water. The little guys, like beetles and worms, probably made it through just fine on their own, proving that sometimes the smallest creatures are the toughest survivors. Extinct species. You might wonder, what about the dinosaurs and other prehistoric creatures? Were they on Noah's Ark? The answer is no. By the time of Noah, many species, like dinosaurs, had already gone extinct. These animals were long gone and didn't have a place on the Ark. Noah's mission wasn't about bringing back creatures that had disappeared. It was about preserving the animals that were alive during his time. The Ark was like a floating sanctuary for the biodiversity of Noah's world. It wasn't designed to resurrect lost species, but to protect the ones that still roamed the earth. The focus was on saving the living creatures, ensuring that the animals of Noah's time would continue to thrive after the floodwaters receded. So while it's fascinating to think about the mighty beasts of the past, the Ark was all about the here and now, safeguarding the animals that were part of everyday life in Noah's world. Hybrid animals. What about those strange hybrid creatures we sometimes hear about in myths, like a camel-leopard mix or other unusual combinations? These kinds of animals didn't make it onto Noah's Ark. The ark was meant to carry pure species, preserving the natural order of the animal kingdom. In Noah's time, the focus was on saving the animals that were part of the natural, unaltered world. Hybrids or unnatural combinations weren't part of that plan. The goal was to ensure that each species could continue to thrive and reproduce as they were intended, without any odd mixtures that might disrupt the balance of nature. So, while hybrid animals might be fun to imagine, they weren't part of the ark's precious cargo. Noah's mission was clear: protect the integrity of the species that existed in his world, ensuring that the natural, unaltered lineages of animals would continue on after the flood. Unclean animals. Not all animals were treated the same when it came to boarding Noah's ark. According to biblical texts, there was a clear distinction between clean and unclean animals. Clean animals, which were considered suitable for eating and sacrifices, were taken onto the ark in pairs of 7. But unclean animals, which didn't meet the same standards of dietary laws and ritual purity, were brought aboard in pairs of 2. This difference highlights the importance of these animals in Noah's world. The clean animals were more numerous because they were essential for food and religious practices after the flood. Meanwhile, the unclean animals were still preserved, but in smaller numbers, ensuring that all species were represented, even those not typically used in daily life or worship. This distinction reminds us of the careful planning that went into preserving life on the ark. Noah wasn't just gathering animals at random. He was following specific guidelines to ensure that both clean and unclean animals would continue to exist after the floodwaters receded. Domesticated pets. When we think of animals on Noah's ark, we often picture pairs of lions, elephants, and other wild creatures. But what about domesticated pets like cats and dogs? Interestingly, these common household pets aren't specifically mentioned in the biblical account of the ark. Back then, pets weren't as prevalent as they are today, and the focus was on saving the wild species that were crucial for maintaining the Earth's balance after the flood. Noah's mission was to preserve the diversity of wild animals that played vital roles in the ecosystem. While we cherish our pets today, they weren't the priority when it came to filling the ark. Instead, the emphasis was on species that were essential for the natural world's survival and regeneration. The animals chosen were those that would help repopulate the earth and restore the ecological balance once the floodwaters receded. So, while your beloved dog or cat might be an important part of your life, they weren't on Noah's list of passengers. And there you have it, a look at the fascinating creatures that didn't board Noah's ark. It's intriguing to think about what was left behind and why. If you enjoyed this exploration, make sure to subscribe to Scripture Chronicles for more insights into the Bible's most interesting stories. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode.